Hello, friends. Welcome to Say Hello, Happy Home. I'm happy to be here with you today on this Tuesday, May 19th, 2026. Here in the great state of Minnesota, it's very cold, windy, and blustery out. It's only going to be in the 50s. You know, it's been like in the 80s and the 90s. This weather, right? Who do you blame? Well, nobody. Can't blame anybody, right? So, that's not what I want to talk to you about. You know, the weather is a big deal here because we live in the prairie. And, I'm basically shut in, so, I don't got a lot of topics to talk about. But there's one I want to talk to you about. Of course, over the weekend there was that horrific mosque shooting, hate crime by juveniles. And last week, the Judge Jeanine Pirro in Washington, D.C., did a press conference addressing the juvenile mobs that are taking over the city streets. They're violent. They're doing horrible crimes. It's just a mess. And how she's going to get, she's going to obtain charges to the fullest extent for these little bastards and their parents. Now, I get that after a certain point in a child's growth and development, they become more independent. Sometimes they get jobs, they're in after school sports, etc. And a parent just physically can't be 100% in front of what their kid is doing. And because kids are trying to exercise that independence, their brains are developing. Neurologically, things are changing. Biologically, things are changing, and they want to beat their chest a little bit and have their own privacy, and their self-awareness starts to develop as a teenager, and they realize that they want some privacy. They want to be able to have some independence, even though they're not technically competent enough to really have privacy and independence. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, helicopter parents, they were called, hover parents, were ridiculed and criticized for being overbearing with their children. Now, some of them were expecting unrealistic achievements out of their children, and it was detrimental to the growth and development of these kids. And then there were parents on the extreme opposite that expected nothing of their kids except participation trophies and telling them that the world revolves around them and creating arrogant, narcissistic humanoids. The choice to have a child is yours, especially here in America, because abortion is legal. If you choose to have sex with somebody that you know is not going to be a reliable parent or a parent at all, then don't have sex with them. Don't be that stupid. Your hormones are not more important. If you find yourself pregnant unwittingly, you have a choice. And if that choice is that you're going to keep that child, then you know that you are giving up a lot of your aspirations, money, time, etc. And you have to accept that. If you have kids, then you really are required to see to those children and be absolutely sure that you know where they are and what they're doing. Strict parenting is not the enemy. You have to crate train a dog to keep them on the straight and narrow and correct them when they have accidents, so on. And your children are no more or less than a house pet as they grow and develop. And humans are not above animals. So to compare them to animals is not cruel and insulting. We are not superior to anything. If you look at other species and how pure they are and real they are and genuine they are, we are far inferior. The difference is these parents that are going to be accountable for their little bastard brats, entitled, arrogant bastard brats, who are destroying the streets of DC and other cities. They're going to go two ways. They're going to show a history of legitimate attempt to try to correct this child's behavior and get some control over this. Or they're going to whine and moan and bitch and use excuses. I'm a single parent. I have to work 2 jobs. Well, if you're a single parent, get public services and work a part-time job or whatever you have to do so that you're home most of the time with the kid. Pay attention to who's watching those kids when you're not home. You knew when you got pregnant that you couldn't afford a kid, you shouldn't have had one. Abortion, adoption, whatever you need to do. Or you just flat out don't have sex if you know that you're not in a position to finance a kid. Or you're not willing to have that commitment, don't have sex. Don't have unprotected sex. Don't assume that one form of contraception is going to take care of the whole problem. There is no excuse for you bringing a child into this world and this child becoming a menace to society and harming other people. No excuse. And I know there are endless excuses, and I can't wait to hear these parents and their endless excuses. There are many case history. If you look at case history, Sandy Hook in particular and others, those parents, there are parents that are doing time in jail for their reckless, disinterested, and weak response to their maniacal children, and resulting in like Sandy Hook, for example. Now, that being said, there are parents that do everything that they can and their kid is still an asshole. You can't prevent your kid from growing up to have a personality that makes them an asshole. But your actions and the way that you rear them as children, raise them, can make the difference between whether your kid is going to grow up to be a productive asshole or a serial killer. Thomas Crooks was a bad seed. He was a very sick and disturbed young man, and his parents, on more than one occasion, multiple occasions, called the authorities, I believe right up to the FBI, telling them that they were worried about him and what he was going to do, that he had access to firearms, that he was mentally unstable. They did the right thing. They did everything they could to help their kid. They couldn't get through to the kid, so they did the next step, which was calling the authorities. They didn't coddle and protect that kid. They tried very hard. And the authorities failed them. This past weekend in San Diego, there was a horrific mosque shooting by 2 juveniles. Immediately upon discovery, one of the shooter's mothers called the police and told them, "My guns are missing. My kid is suicidal. You got to find my kid. He's going to do something to someone or himself." So the authorities were actively looking. Was it too little, too late? Well, one never knows. But those teenagers took their own lives after they took the lives of others in that mosque. The parent did everything she could. She knew her kid was unstable. She was concerned about her kid. But of course, because of our skewed laws, people are very limited now as to what they can do. Actionable measures to turn their kids around, to protect their kids, to do something to stop their kids from becoming shooters. And you have the choice. You can look the other way and make excuses, or you can make every attempt you can. And still, the outcome may not be desirable. But at least you can go to bed at night knowing that you did the best you could to try to stop your children from doing the ultimate crime, which is taking life. I am so sick of people popping children like they're Tic Tacs, leeching off of the system, and saying, well, I can't help it. I have to work 2 jobs. I have to do this. You need to be a better human. You need to stop and think. And if you had been better teenagers, if you had been raised differently, if, we can go down the if line all day long. In some cases, you can do all you can do, and it's never enough. Sandy Hook, San Diego, Butler. Sandy Hook, they did not enough. They had been warned repeatedly. They knew their kid was mentally ill. He was on medications, I believe, and they still gave him access to guns. San Diego and Butler, they knew their kid was mentally ill. They knew their kid had a problem, suicidal, but had access to guns, tried to prevent that access to guns. And when it was too late, they called the authorities. They did the right thing. There's always going to be an if or a shoulda, woulda, coulda. But it all comes down to the one decision. Am I prepared to have a kid? If you are not prepared to commit 1,000%, your finances, your emotions, your physical life, your home, your property, your mental stability, everything has to be parsed out and committed and devoted to that human that you are creating. If you can't afford them, don't have them. If you were forced into sex against your will and you become pregnant, you do have a choice. And hopefully, if you make the choice to keep the child, your family will help. And lean on your families. Stop being so egotistical that you think that you can't put your differences aside to ask your family to help. Communal living is very effective. And in broken homes, you find broken children. In homes that have multi-generational homes, I guess you could call them. I know it used to be called communal living. Now they're multi-generational, I believe. Where you have grandparents, aunts, uncles, family staying. There's typically a fluid component. Sometimes it's religious, sometimes it's social construct, sometimes it's for the benefit of finance. When you blend generations of families, you can share the financial burdens, you can share the work. There are ways. But you ultimately make a choice to have a kid. Early development is crucial. Being hyper aware of that child as they develop. Stop putting your careers ahead of kids. You cannot put your health in the back seat to your kid. You can't put your finances in the back seat to your kid. You can't put your home. You have to have a safe home to raise them in. They need food, clothing, shelter, medical. They need all of that. But at the same time, if you have a hyper demanding career, you're in the military, you're law enforcement, you're an ER doctor, you're any of those kinds of things, you know what? Hiring a nanny is not the right way to do it. Hiring a nanny is not a good idea. You need to change that job. You need to become a doctor's office doctor. You need to find don't be a B cop. Try to work in the office or something where you've got that 8 to 10 hour shift. You made the choice to have that kid. Now you need to make the life choices and changes that are necessary so that you are there 99% of the time for that child. And you need to be hyper vigilant and hyper aware of how their personalities are developing and the signs and the symptoms. And nip that shit in the bud. Mobs of kids, violent mobs, destroying cities, streets, and businesses. Who the fuck are they? Where do they get off doing that? And why? They think it's funny? They think there's no consequences? Entire generations of narcissists? The schools should never be allowed to raise your children. You are responsible for them. The judicial system is not responsible for raising your children. You are. The law enforcement systems are not responsible for controlling your children. You are. You have a choice to have a kid. You have a choice to have sex. You have a choice to have a kid. You have a choice on how you're going to raise that kid and what sacrifices you're going to make as a grown-ass adult to raise that kid right. You may make all the right choices and right decisions and still your kid turns out to be a bad seed. But at least you know you did everything you could. Excuses are not the same as doing everything you can. You need to do some self-reflecting. You need to do some soul-searching. But this has got to stop. These little bastards need to be taken to heel. And they need to be taken away from their bad parents. Maybe even institutionalized if they're that sick. But it needs to stop. We don't have that problem in my community, and that's not an ignorant statement like, oh, that doesn't happen here. The actual facts, the police reports, the public records, the data, the stats actually physically show that we don't have that kind of a problem here in my community. So it's possible that you can, actually raise decent kids. Sure, they're going to be naughty, they're going to be loud, destructive, they're going to have their problems. But in the end, they're going to grow up to be productive, law-abiding humans, as opposed to what's happening in DC. So get your act together, get your kids under control. And until next time, do good and be good.